Hello and welcome to our cybersecurity Houston series. Cyber Houston is a collaborative initiative focusing on building a more cyber resilient Houston by bringing together experts like me, amigo Pierluigi and John, business leaders, and the community. This series is your go-to resource for practical insights on cybersecurity, resilience, and risk in today's digital world. And with that, I will give the word to my amigo John, who has a very special subject for us today. John, what will we be talking about?
Thank you, Andy. Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are and whenever you're watching us. I have to say, we had some pre-show banter, and it started getting along to the point where we said, man, we should be recording this. It's just so much easier to talk when it's free-flowing and you feel like the camera isn't running. But what I was thinking about today, and over the past few weeks, if not months, what really is important to a small business owner, a mid-sized business owner, a principal, an executive? What should I be thinking about? There's so much I'm bombarded with cyber threat intelligence. I see things in the news, I hear things, you go to board meetings, and there's so much cyber, agentic AI, regular AI. It's overwhelming. And so I thought to myself, maybe the three of us should talk about our top 3 to 5 recommendations for what you should be guarding against. And then I even whittled it down further. And actually, I was on top of about a 25-foot ladder pulling down Christmas lights. And just as a Christmas light might flash in front of me or a light bulb goes off over my head, I said, it's the data, dummy. People need to be guarding their data. That's what's important to them. And we all have tons of data. So being able to really narrow down into those crown jewels, that's what we need to be thinking about. That's what needs to be secured, protected, and defended. And so that's a pretty easy thing to say. Nobody can dispute it. But how do we take that into actionable steps? And so I start thinking about, well, what touches data? How does it all manifest? And how does that show up in areas of defense? And we know that data gets opened, consumed, viewed, and processed by computer programs. And people, or service accounts, agentic AI, robotic process automation, scheduled tasks, there's a number of things that cause a program to launch that grabs data, looks at it, processes it, manipulates it. And we know that programs are on machines, and machines are on networks. So we really now have a defense in depth architecture that's pre-built based on how we touch data. We know we need to protect the data itself. We have to protect the identities of people. We have to protect the computers with, endpoint detection and response. We have to protect the network, which is firewalls, intrusion prevention. There's a ton of things, but we really have to focus on what's most important. And to me, the number one thing in today's world to guard against is identity. There are a number of red teamers, hackers, and penetration testers who say they no longer have to hack in, they simply log in. And that's the concept of an identity. I'll throw that out there as the first area that we really need to focus on to protect our data. And I'd like to hear some thoughts from Andy and Pierluigi on what identity means to them and how they recommend we guard against and protect identities.
Okay, so when you ask the question and we were preparing, this is the cool thing. You ask, hey, how we do this, and then you change subjects, which I really like. So the way that I will normally recommend the protection on the client side, I will always use the CIS framework. That's someone it's a place that I believe what they do. I believe that they keep it up to date. And when you talk about data, it's very interesting because from version 7 to version 8, that was the highest jump in priority in the recommendations from the whole framework. So they jump, I think, from 14 to 3. It was a huge jump. So still asset management is number 1 and number 2 from a hardware and software perspective, but number 3 is data. So how you protect your data. When you see that and we have been talking about the zero trust architecture, we can all agree that, identity has become the paramount and the new perimeter, if you wish, when you talk about security. And I have seen a trend pretty much on the vectors of successful attacks, as you, Sean, were saying, that identity has become probably the easiest friction way of of breaking into an organization through, password, breach, or through, just installing a token and being able to break in an organization. So I will agree with you that the identity protection has become a very important subject for information security. And on one thing I want to say is that some of these things that we have been discussing, and Pierluigi will say that we have been discussing for the last 20 years, they're very boring. They're not very sexy. Some of these things is just having a good governance and a good structure to be able to protect the things that you need. And it's very easy to get hooked in, oh, let's buy this tool, and then forget that the tool cannot do what you need to do without the governance.
We opened up a big can of worms here today. I don't know that we're going to need many sessions for this. First of all, let me clarify something about the data, right? The danger of limiting to the data is that many, and let's remember that this is not for experts and CISOs. This is primarily, we're trying to talk to business owners, right? The danger when I talk to people is that they think they don't have anything to protect. And when I ask the data, they say they don't have any data. There is this perception, right, that you have data only if you have other people's information, like in healthcare and banking, or you have some secret drawing for your manufacturing that you don't want the Chinese to steal, or some other very important thing. In reality, we live in 2025 in the time of information technology and AI. Data is anything and everything in your network, right? So to tell me I don't have any data to protect, I object. You do. You probably don't know. So maybe you need to take a step back, and if you think you don't have anything to protect, there's no data worth protecting, reassess your situation first of all, and find out what data you actually have. And is it really true that none of this, that if it went down in the public, got destroyed, you lost it, you could still do business? You lost your account receivables, your account payables, the list of your clients, I don't know, whatever, just mention something. You can tell me all this data is in SaaS. Okay, but SaaS can fail too. You should have a backup somewhere, just to say, because we rely on these major companies out there too much. Just this today comes just in a very appropriate way right after a major collapse of Microsoft 365 yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
That caused horrendous headaches to the entire country and probably the entire world. We rely on these vendors. In the last 2 months, we have had, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but forgive me, but it's important. We've had Cloudflare had a problem. Google had a problem. The unthinkable has happened. Google has had a problem. Microsoft has had 2 or 3 problems. This was the major one yesterday. AWS had a problem. We rely on these companies so much. Okay, you're putting your data in the cloud, and that could be your, your QuickBooks in the cloud. Okay, but you gotta have something somewhere, right? And what if that gets accessed? So you do have data. That's the point. Just to roll it back to the original question, you have data. You just need to find out what the data is, where it is, and if it's really protected. The reason why in the last 3, 4, 5 years we are finally talking about zero trust at the data level is because we realize now, finally, that access to the data needs to be proper. We have seen way too many times where everybody on the Active Directory has admin access because somebody was too lazy to create proper groups and proper setup. Those things keep happening in 2025. That's unacceptable, right? You cannot be lazy and do cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is annoying, it's boring, it's not sexy, but you have to do it. And you have to analyze your data properly, and you have to protect it with access control, which there is a lot of ways. There is passwordless, there is zero trust, there's a lot of things. We can talk for days. We write white papers on this. The real problem is you have to do it. You have to make sure as a business owner that somebody is setting up access control to your data properly, and that all of your network is properly protected, because you do have something to lose. And to say I only spend $50 a month or $200 a year for my cybersecurity because I don't have anything to lose, that's nonsense.
Yeah, Pierluigi, up until 2010, I owned a group of small businesses. And I got into cyber because one of those companies got hacked. It was back in 2001, and we got hacked by some Chinese hacktivists. So I broke every single rule in the book when it came to defending our networks. And a lot of people that I talk to today, a lot of business owners or executives, they don't think about the data so much as they have a thought process of, why would anybody want to hack me? I don't have anything important.
Yeah.
And so that's really, sometimes that leaches into their view of their own data. But I think every business owner has some form of a price, internal use only, a quoting program, price sheets. They've got information on their employees. They've got information on themselves. They've got their books. So there's a lot of private business owners I know that they would be terrified if the world knew how much money they made or how much money that company made. They really love flying under the radar. So I think there's a lot of data that can be stolen. And I think that for a lot of people watching this, and by the way, just, Pierluigi made reference to a Microsoft 365 outage. We are recording this on the 23rd of January, 2026. So the outage was on Jan 22. I would really encourage people to think about it from the outside in. Where does that attacker sit? Where does the data sit? And what's that critical path to get to the data? And I've used identity as one. And the reason why I use it is it shows up repeatedly in many incident response summaries. So if we think about the Verizon data breach and investigation report, they are telling us that initial access is most successful through identity abuse, the exploitation of vulnerabilities, and phishing. So that's really, if I'm concerned about my data, I'm concerned about identity, I'm concerned about phishing, and I'm concerned about exploitation of vulnerabilities. So we've talked a little bit about identity, and identity is an assertion. I say I'm John. Well, I typically provide a password to prove that I am who I said I am. And many people stop there. That's one factor of authentication. To really protect that identity, to really protect your data, we should be layering in multiple factors of authentication. Things like multi-factor authentication, push notification through an app on your phone. There's tons of authenticator apps. Google has an app, Microsoft has an app, Okta has an app, Ping Identity has an app. There's a number of them out there. Sometimes we get one-time passcodes sent via SMS text message or via an email. Yeah. While better than nothing, those are not great forms of multi-factor authentication. But that's really when we think about the identity. I'm going to protect it with a username, with a password, with another level of authentication. We do it every single day on our iPhones and our Android devices with face scan or a thumbprint, right? That's an additional. So how can we layer that in to our username and our password? We only have a finite amount of time, and we've talked a little bit about identity. Pierluigi, let's kick it over to you for your thoughts on the second of those three initial attack vectors is the exploitation of vulnerabilities. What advice would you give a small business owner or a mid-sized business executive about patching vulnerabilities, about remediating vulnerabilities so that bad guys can't get in from the outside?
I try really hard not to talk about network hawks on this call because I am a vendor, but I try to be neutral. But you really tickled me. You really went on purpose there. Because the way we provide our service, right? Our devices, our systems, our services are constantly connected to our SOCs 24 hours a day with a reverse tunnel. The moment there is a patch, it's applied. The last time we had a vulnerability, within an hour, the entire globe of network boxes was patched within an hour, right? And now, obviously, I'm not asking that everybody goes out and buy a network box. I would love that too, but the point, it's not realistic. The point is, you have to have a system, whatever the system is, and you have to be sure that whoever is doing your IT, your security, is on top of things. That if there is a vulnerability announced, somehow, right? Sometimes it's not even waiting for the patch. It's also remediating in other ways. Monitoring that the vulnerability doesn't apply to you because, I don't know, you lock down the port, you temporarily close the net, you do something until you have the patch. Don't just wait for the vendor to give you the patch. Sitting here, it's not my fault if I get hacked because they didn't give me the patch. No, that doesn't work the way. Because if you get hacked, you're the one that got hacked, not the vendor. So, and not you, I mean, not the business owner, because the business owner probably isn't doing that physically actively. But as a business owner, I would want to be proactive in asking, how are we doing this? What are we doing? What is the procedure? If there is a new vulnerability, a new exploit, are we just waiting 6 months until they give me a patch? Or are we doing something now to make sure that they can get in, right? And this is at the firewall level. On the workstations and servers, it's not always an easy conversation, right? Because yes, if you have a regular workstation, Windows 11, just apply the patches every month and go with it. But at the same time, sometimes you are running legacy systems, and there are so many of those that cannot be patched, right? You're running a system that you have right here, somebody developing the new version with the newer systems that will run on the newer operating system, but while that's being done, you're running an old version that cannot be patched. So what do you do? Depends on what it is. If it is a web application, for example, immediately go look for a WAF. Because if you cannot patch your web application because it's running on PHP 1.0 from 20 years ago, and you just can't fix it until you redevelop it, at least put a WAF in front of it. Something that can recognize a possible exploit more and better than an IPS and offers a protection. So how you patch and how you protect depends on what exactly we're talking about. But certainly don't just wait for somebody to do it for you.
And maybe not. It's not. Maybe it's not just the what you're patching, Pierluigi, but where does it sit? Because certainly a vulnerability on an asset that faces the internet and can receive incoming traffic,
yes, exactly.
That asset's much more dangerous to you. Correct. You know. And you said a great thing. And before we pass the torch to Andy, I want to talk about I'm going to say what Pierluigi said in a different way. If we wait for a patch, if we patch something, we prevent. We're in this mode of prevention.
Yes.
But if we can't prevent, we take other maybe system configuration options to make the bad guy's job harder. But we have to ask our technical teams, hey, if the vendor doesn't give me a patch and a threat actor attempts to exploit our device, are we capable of seeing it? Can we do we have the right visibility? Can we detect this? And if we can detect this, what are we going to do about it? We have to go into response mode. What's our playbook look like? Do we have a playbook? And so if I'm a small business owner or an executive of a mid-sized company, these are the questions I'm asking of my team or my MSSP so that I have higher comfort level that we're going to be shielded from this vulnerability, even though the patch hasn't been released, even though we can't apply that patch.
Yeah, I would like to make a very important distinguish, right? And this is for everyone. I know that you guys know this, but let's be clear: vulnerabilities is not the remediation of vulnerabilities is not only patching, right? We're talking about misconfiguration, or we're talking about unsecure protocols. Because, if you have a device which having a default password from the vendor, there's no patch for that. You need to go and change the password, right? Or if you have a SMB version 1 running on your Windows servers, you need to turn that off. Right, so there are going to be vulnerabilities, and Pierluigi was saying something like this: is that you need to go and fix, and there's no patching around that. You have to go and turn off some things or change some passwords. So it's very important that people understand that there is a risk base for every one of these kind of things. Some of them are patching, but some of them are actually changes in configurations that needs to happen to reduce the risk of those vulnerabilities. And there's going to be some of them, like, for example, Windows has a vulnerability, that you guys probably are aware, that if you store your credentials right in the Windows machine, it will be flagged as a vulnerability. And that's something that if you don't have that, and if you are a domain joined computer, you will not be able to log in that computer if you're home. So you don't want to remediate, right, that vulnerability, right? So there's going to be certain things, and someone needs to sit down with you, explain the risk, explain how you will be able to fix. But patching is one, and probably the most frequent one that we see. But I still see a lot of SMB version 1s around. I still see that a lot. I still find, default passwords in some equipment. And what you say, John, about having the external versus internal kind of view of this is extremely important. And if you have a legacy system that, let's say that these use SMB1 to give you an example, there's a lot of things that you can do at the network layer to just authorize that from certain devices, certain services to just block the rest. So there is a lot of opportunity to reduce the risk of that vulnerability. I'm sorry, John, I interrupt you.
No, that's all great stuff. And listening to the two of you talk and redirect some of these comments, it makes me think that there's an episode that's lurking on system hardening, right? So we talk about SMB1. That really should be a deprecated protocol. It's a risky protocol. It's been replaced by SMB2. It's been replaced by SMB3. And we know that hackers really exploit some of these protocols. Andy, you'll be there on the 12th of February, Horseshoe Bay, for the TBA CyberTech conference. You'll be able to see me do some shenanigans with some deprecated protocols inside of an Active Directory network. So I tend to like to break things in real time during these conferences. The third thing, right? So we're protecting our data. And to protect our data, it's all about, we're really focused on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that data. And a lot of what we're talking about today is preventing the initial access, that unauthorized access to our data, which means we're protecting its confidentiality. We're also protecting its integrity because a threat actor can't alter that data. We're protecting its availability because if a threat actor does gain initial access, potentially they can run untrusted code with a terrifying payload that the rest of the world calls ransomware. And so what have we talked about today? We talked about identity. We've talked about remediation of vulnerabilities. And the third most common way that a threat actor gains initial access into an environment and puts your data at risk is through social engineering. Social engineering shows up in many different ways. And Andy, I'll have you start us off with your thoughts on social engineering and what business owners can do and executives can do to protect their organizations from phishing attacks.
Something I found very funny about this is that, and I don't know, Pierluigi, you will agree with me, but email protection is probably the most hate control that we have to deploy. People do not like it, because we see a lot of organizations still not having normal practices, right? So all the time you have to battle with people why it would be a good idea to block a SPF failed email, right? So you still see a lot of organizations saying, oh, I'm waiting this email from this client, and because we establish an email protection strategy that is decent with today's threats, those emails do not arrive. I honestly feel that there is a huge disbalance in how people are protecting their emails, a huge one. And then when you try to do the right thing for the organization, and I'm sure Pierre Rich is laughing about this, we have this request about, oh, why list that domain? Why list the whole domain? And I was like, what? We cannot do that, right? It's like super risky to do that, especially if you know that on the other end, that person doesn't have the right controls. The problem with email protection is that it's you against everyone, right? And if you set up your stuff correctly, you're going to find these situations that you need the support of the ownership team, that they need to understand that this is to better protect your organization, and you are going to have to evaluate case by case when something is a false positive. But we see a lot of false positives because the other end of people, they just don't have the right protections in place.
Well, what is helping us, I know I'm interrupting you, but it's relevant. What is helping us a lot in this is Google. Because Google, you cannot talk to anybody, right? And when they decide a policy and they run with it. And they're Google, so they can do it. They don't care. And then Microsoft recently joined them. So now you have 99.9% of the internet. If you don't have your DMARC, DKIM, and SPF properly set, you're not talking to them. So it's forcing a lot of companies to go back and revisit their stance on this, fix their SPF records, create a DMARC they didn't have it, fix their DKIM. It's making our life a lot easier. I remember 5 years ago trying to set up a catching DKIM so that we could properly identify emails. It backfired in 5 minutes. I had to take it off because there were so many that were broken and incorrectly set up that we just couldn't rely on it. Today, it's become a much more reliable item to check because If you don't have it properly set, you're not talking to any Gmail account. You email it, they push it back to you, like, fix your stuff. Right? So that is helping a lot in that sense. The fact that the big guys, if you will, are enforcing their rules on this setup. But I don't remember how we started and why we got to the DKIM.
Well, listen, no, Pierre, these are great. These are great elements, because when we talk about phishing,
yes,
email filtering, a secure email gateway, is a powerful control to protect your company against phishing. Yeah. And Google and Microsoft have some stringent requirements on what other mail servers need to do to ensure delivery of mail to a mailbox.
Yep.
Now, if you're a small business or a medium-sized business and you run on-premise Exchange, everything that Andy and Pierluigi were talking about with regards to the sender's policy framework, domain keys, DMARC, right? So you'll hear SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. These are things you simply just need to talk to your messaging team or your email administrator, systems administrator, MSP, and let them know, hey, are we making the bad guy's job harder with how we receive email? And are we sending email in a compatible way so that the rest of the world will receive it and not throw it away? Now, better news for most small businesses, you're using outsourced email. You're using Microsoft 365. You're using Google's, whatever the name of the work suite is today. I don't know what their name is, but then the configuration is taken care of for you.
So actually, it's not. You have to go there and do it. The SPF is the only record that, for example, Microsoft will give you. I'm not sure with Google, but Microsoft will only give you the SPF. All the rest of the stuff you're going to have to do. And if you want the protections for the incoming stuff, you're going to have, and this is where we always talk, right? There are some preset things there, but you have to have someone who understands how that product goes and then needs to put their fingers and then correctly set up those things.
I was thinking, Andy, more on the outbound side. So I think that a lot of the SPF, DMARC, DKIM is harder to set up for outgoing mail than it is to, click a button to say, hey, if DMARC fails, reject the message. Maybe help set me straight on, are the big platforms set? I mean, don't they have, they have their, don't they have their DNS records set with regards to DKIM and SPF, or does the tenant owner need to do that?
Correct. It's yours. It's your domain. You have to set it up in your DNS records. You have to create your DMARC and establish what your policy is, where the notifications go, which email address the notification goes if there's a problem. Do you want to reject, accept, whatever, ignore? There are certain actions to be taken. So these are things that you can uniquely decide.
Man, I need to start watching your podcast.
Now, the DKIM is the only thing that, for example, Microsoft will let you create the DKIM signatures, but then, as Pierluigi was saying, is you have to go to your DNS records and create those records for you to be able to pretty much associate the keys with the selector, are called selectors on the DNS, and then the policy of the DMARC is also something that you have to set up on your DNS based on the options that you want.
However, we started this talking about how do you the social engineering. Right? There is nothing better than education. Now, my ancestors used to say "repetita juvant," which means repeat, and I'll help you. Education is not something you do once and you forget, because people forget. You need to constantly educate. I can tell you something that almost happened to one of my clients. This person received a text, and this was a teller of a bank here in Houston. The teller of the bank receives a text that they had some problem with their computer with their phone, and in order to fix the problem, she needed to allow them access via TeamViewer on her computer.
No way.
And she did it. The only reason why the whole thing didn't blow up is because we blocked the access. And so we picked up the phone, called the IT director, what's going on with this? He went and checked and told us the story afterwards, right? But if we hadn't stopped it, this is a teller of a bank that after undergoing training, God knows how many hours of training they do in the banks every month, she still did what she did. So training, because it's never sufficient. Yes. It's the only real defense against social engineering is the person's awareness of what could possibly happen. Be suspicious, because we live in a world where you have to be. You cannot be trusting and trusting. Period. Okay?
And I would add on to that, and then Pierluigi, I'll turn it over to you to close this out. But when we think about training, as it comes to social engineering, as it comes to phishing, we train, we test, we get results from testing, we provide feedback. So think about a closed loop: train, test, feedback, train, test, feedback. Don't name and shame. Don't punish people. That's a very short-term type of motivation.
100%.
But I agree with Pierluigi and Andy 100%. Training is paramount when it comes to phishing protection. Every human could be the strongest link. They could be the weakest link. And training and exercising their training sometimes is that distinguishing factor between the two.
Let me add one line to this. C-level people have a tendency to be a little presumptuous, assume too much of themselves, and often they end up being the real threat for the company, because a teller, what I told you was an episode, right? But most often the people that are lower in the food chain in a company are more careful because they're scared of losing their job. I notice a certain kind of, I think the right word is hubris, the higher you go, and that becomes problematic, because all of us, we're all humans, we're all susceptible, we can all fall victim of a phishing attack, and we can all be social engineered. So doesn't matter your level in the company, everyone should be doing it, and everyone should be tested, and everyone should be repeating it, annoying as it might sound, because it is annoying, right? It's boring. By all means, I see that, but you need to be alert and aware, and that's the only way to defend yourself. Okay?
Well, another great episode. This closes out episode 6. Actually, we're up to episode 6 of the series. I know it might say episode 5 in one of the corners of the screen I'm looking at, but the first episode was kind of a reintroduction and a soft relaunch of the group. So thanks for watching, and Pierluigi, if you could close us out.
Absolutely, thank you. And this was a very nice discussion. So we hope that Cyber Houston series brings you actionable insights in the weeks ahead. Of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, also at cyberhouston.org, and this way you will stay connected with us. Thank you for joining us today, and together we are hoping to be strengthening Houston's cyber resilience. Thank you, and goodbye.